My family cut me off for going to trade school. Now they're begging me to fix their houses for free. Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here we are. This story has been eating at me for months now, and I need to get it off my chest. I'm 28, female, and apparently the biggest disappointment my family ever produced. At least that's what they told me for years. Turns out I might have been the smartest one after all. Let me start from the beginning so you understand the full picture of how messed up my family dynamics were and how satisfying it was when everything finally came full circle. Growing up, my older brother Marcus, 31, was basically treated like the second coming of Christ in our household. Perfect grades, student council president, academic scholarships, the whole 9 yards. Meanwhile, I was the kid who preferred working with my hands over hitting the books. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't stupid. I just learned better by doing things rather than reading about them. My parents, both college-educated professionals, had this vision of their children following in their footsteps. Mom's a nurse practitioner, dad's an accountant. They met in college, got their degrees, bought the house in the suburbs, had the careers. The American dream, right? In their minds, college was the only path to success, and anything else was just settling for less. I'll never forget the day in my junior year of high school when I told them I wanted to take shop class instead of AP chemistry. You would have thought I'd announced I was dropping out to become a drug dealer. Shop class? Mom said, looking at me like I'd grown a second head. Why would you want to waste time playing with tools when you could be preparing for college? Dad jumped in immediately. Daughter, you need to think about your future. College is the only way to make something of yourself these days. You don't want to end up like those people working construction, breaking their backs for minimum wage. Marcus, who was home from his first year at State University, just smirked from across the dinner table. Come on, little sister, you're smarter than that. Don't you want to have a career you can be proud of? I tried to explain that I actually enjoyed working with my hands, that I was good at building things, fixing things, but they weren't hearing it. To them, manual labor was what people did when they couldn't cut it in the real world. So I took AP chemistry to keep the peace, got a C- and hated every minute of it. Things came to a head during my senior year when it was time to apply for colleges. I had decent grades, not Marcus level, but solid Bs mostly. I could have gotten into a state school, probably even gotten some financial aid. But I kept thinking about my friend Jake's older brother, who'd gone to trade school for welding and was making $75,000 a year at 22, working on industrial projects and loving what he did. Meanwhile, Marcus was struggling through his engineering program, stressed out of his mind, calling home every week complaining about how hard his classes were, how much debt he was racking up, how he wasn't sure he even liked engineering, but felt trapped because he'd already invested so much time and money. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I applied to the local community college's welding program, 2-year certification, hands-on training, job placement assistance, and I could do it for a fraction of the cost of a 4-year degree. It seemed like a no-brainer to me. When I told my parents at dinner, the reaction was explosive. Absolutely not, Dad said immediately. I'm not paying for you to learn to be a welder. That's not a career, that's a job. There's a difference, Mom added. A career is something you build on, something with growth potential. Welding is just manual labor. Marcus, who was home for spring break and still complaining about his classes, actually laughed. Seriously, Yara? Welding? You want to spend your life in some dirty shop breathing in fumes when you could have a real profession? It is a real profession, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Good welders make excellent money. Industrial welders can make 6 figures. There's always going to be demand for... Oh, please, Mom interrupted. Those are rare exceptions. Most welders are barely getting by. Look, if money is tight, we can figure out student loans for you to go to state like Marcus. It's an investment in your future. That's when Dad dropped the ultimatum that changed everything. Here's the deal, daughter. If you want to throw your life away learning to be a welder, that's your choice. But don't expect us to pay for it. And don't expect us to pretend we're proud of you for settling for less than your potential. The room went dead silent. Even Marcus looked uncomfortable. So, if I go to trade school, I said slowly, you won't support me? Why would we support you making a bad decision? Dad replied. Sometimes tough love is what it takes. You'll thank us later when you realize we were right and you decide to get a real education. I looked around the table at my family. Mom was nodding along with Dad. Marcus was staring at his plate, not meeting my eyes. None of them believed in me. None of them thought I could make something of myself doing what I actually wanted to do. Fine, I said, standing up from the table. I'll do it myself. And I did. I moved out a week after graduation, found a crappy studio apartment across town, got a warehouse job, and enrolled in welding school. Using my grandparents' graduation money and a small community college loan, I qualified for myself. The first months were brutal, working 30 hours weekly, school full-time, learning completely new skills. My hands were constantly cut up. I was exhausted, living on ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. But I loved it. For the first time, I was learning something that made sense. The instructors were industry veterans who taught not just welding but business fundamentals, bidding jobs, working with employers, starting your own company someday. Meanwhile, my family wrote me off. Mom called occasionally. It's not too late to change your mind. You could still apply for spring semester at State. Dad wouldn't talk to me. Marcus texted condescending messages like, "How's the blue-collar life treating you?" I stopped responding. The turning point came second semester when instructor Jerry Martinez pulled me aside. "You've got real talent. But more than that, you understand the business side. You're not just learning a trade, you're building a career." Jerry had run his own fabrication business for 15 years. He offered me part-time work at his shop with better pay than the warehouse and real-world experience. "Start thinking beyond welding," he advised. "Learn fabrication, basic electrical, take business classes. Successful contractors aren't just welders, they're problem solvers." I took evening business classes during my second year, learning contracts, insurance, pricing strategies. I started taking side jobs, neighbors' repairs, custom pieces, car welding. Small money, but building reputation. By graduation, I had certification, 2 years experience, satisfied customers, and a plan. Jerry was retiring and offered to sell me his equipment and customer list for $45,000, professional gear, and 15 years of business relationships. With my $15,000 savings and a small business loan, I became a business owner at 20. Marcus had just graduated State with his engineering degree and $80,000 in loans. He struggled finding work, eventually taking a manufacturing job, paying $42,000, barely more than I made part-time welding in school. When I called home about buying Jerry's business, Mom said, "That's nice, honey, but it's still not too late for real school. You could get your degree and have a real career." I hung up and didn't call back for 6 months. The first year was a grind, but my grind. I worked 60-hour weeks, took unwanted jobs, never refused learning opportunities. I specialized in custom fabrication and repairs, jobs requiring creativity and problem solving. My reputation grew through delivering more than expected and solving problems others couldn't. By year 2, I was booked solid. Year 3, I had 4 employees and a real shop. I got electrical certification, added plumbing basics, offered complete fabrication services. We became the people you called for unsolvable problems. By 24, I was clearing $150,000 profit yearly, owned a house and a new truck, with money banked and industry respect. Marcus bounced between engineering jobs, lived with roommates, made loan payments that never seemed to shrink, constantly complaining his degree hadn't prepared him for reality. My parents still acted like Marcus was the success story and I'd settled for less. The first crack in my family's delusion came 5 years into running my business. I was 25 and we had just landed our biggest contract yet, $300,000, to fabricate custom architectural metalwork for a downtown office building. Marcus had just been laid off from his third engineering job, company downsizing. He was panicking about student loan payments and rent. He called me for the first time in over a year. "Hey, little sister, how's the welding thing going?" he said, trying to sound casual. "It's going well," I said carefully. I'd learned not to share much with family. They always found ways to minimize my success. "That's cool. Listen, I'm between jobs right now. I was thinking maybe I could help out temporarily, just until I find another engineering position." This was the same brother who'd called welding not a real profession for years. Now, he wanted a job. "What kind of help?" I asked. "Well, I've got an engineering degree. I could help with the technical side, maybe help you bid bigger projects, bring some professional expertise to the operation." Even asking for help, he couldn't resist implying my business lacked professional expertise. "Marcus, do you have experience with welding, fabrication, construction project management?" Well, no, but engineering principles are engineering principles. I could learn the specifics quickly. And you'd want an engineering salary? I've got loans to pay. I was making $55,000 at my last job, so something in that range would be helpful. 55,000 plus benefits for someone with no industry experience who'd need months of training before contributing anything meaningful. I'll think about it, I said. I didn't call back. 2 weeks later, Mom called. We need to talk about Marcus. Family is supposed to help family. I considered his request. It's just not a good fit. Because you're jealous of his education, his potential. You've always resented that Marcus was the smart one, and now you're getting revenge. Even with Marcus unemployed and me running a successful business, she still thought he was the smart one. Mom, his degree doesn't teach him to read architectural plans, manage construction schedules, or operate fabrication equipment. Those skills take years to develop. So teach him. That's what family does. Would Marcus have hired me at his engineering jobs? That's different. How? She couldn't answer. The real turning point came when I was 26. I'd bought a larger shop, hired my 8th employee, and was doing over $2 million in revenue annually. Marcus had found a new job, but taken a step backward. $38,000 at a small firm, still living with roommates, still drowning in debt. Meanwhile, my parents' house was falling apart. They'd bought it in 1995, and by 2019, it was showing its age badly. Rotting deck, leaking roof, outdated electrical, constant plumbing backups. Dad called on a Saturday morning. First time in over 2 years. Daughter, we've got a situation. The deck finally collapsed. Your mother almost fell through yesterday. We need it fixed, but the quotes are astronomical. How astronomical? Lowest bid is $8,000 just for the deck. One guy said $15,000 for everything. After years of dismissing my career as not real work, now they wanted to benefit from it. We know you do this kind of work now. We were hoping you could help us out. Family rates, you know. I drove over the next day. I hadn't been there in almost a year and was shocked. The deck wasn't just rotting. It was a legitimate safety hazard with completely failed support beams. Walking around, I spotted a dozen major issues: missing roof shingles, water damage, ancient electrical panel, cracked driveway destroying their cars. How long has it been like this? I asked. Oh, you know, old houses. Always something needing attention. Dad, this isn't something. This is thousands in deferred maintenance. The electrical panel needs complete replacement before you have a house fire. I spent an hour doing a comprehensive assessment. Immediate safety issues. Deck, electrical, emergency roof repairs would run $25,000. Full renovation, $80,000. I priced everything exactly as I would for any customer. Actually, more thoroughly, because I knew the problems and wanted everything done right. Dad called an hour after receiving my $4,500 bid. This has got to be a mistake. These prices are more than the other guys quoted. Dad, this includes work they didn't even mention. They quoted just deck replacement. This includes bringing your electrical to code and using materials that actually last. But your family, we thought you'd give us a deal. Dad, this is my business. These prices reflect actual costs. People help their families, like how you helped when I was starting my business. Silence. I'll give you the same family rates I give all my family, I said finally. Great, what's the discount? There is no discount, Dad. My family rates equal my regular rates because my family never supported my business. That afternoon, I drove over to my neighbor Bill's house. Bill was a retired teacher who lived 2 doors down from me. 6 months earlier, he'd asked me to build a custom ramp for his wife, who was in a wheelchair. It was a small job, maybe $800 in materials and a day's work. But Bill was on a fixed income and worried about the cost. I'd done the job for free, not because he was family, but because he was a good neighbor who'd always been kind to me, and because his wife needed the ramp to safely access their home. When Bill tried to pay me, I told him the only payment I wanted was for him to pass on the favor someday when he could help someone else. That's what family actually looks like. It's not about blood relations or sharing a last name. It's about people who support each other, who believe in each other, who are there when it matters. Over the years, I'd built a real family. Jerry, who'd mentored me and given me the chance to buy his business. My employees who'd grown with the company and trusted me to make decisions that kept us all working. My customers, who'd referred friends and family because they trusted the quality of our work. My neighbors, who'd become genuine friends. These people had supported me when my actual family wouldn't. They'd celebrated my successes and helped me through challenges. Bill wasn't the only neighbor I'd helped over the years. Mrs. Chen across the street had needed her front gate repaired after a storm. I'd done it for the cost of materials. The young couple next to her had wanted a custom fire pit for their backyard. I'd built it at cost as a wedding present. These weren't business decisions, they were family decisions. Dad called back 3 days later. "We've decided to go with another contractor," he said. "We found someone who can do the deck for $6,000. "That's great," I said. "I hope it works out." "You don't sound like you think it will." I didn't, actually. A $6,000 deck job meant either substandard materials, corners being cut on the foundation work, or both. But it wasn't my problem anymore. "I hope I'm wrong," I said. 2 months later, Marcus called me. "Yara, you need to see Mom and Dad's deck." "Why?" "Because it's already falling apart. The contractor they hired used pressure-treated lumber that was still wet. The whole thing is warping and pulling apart. Dad's furious." I wasn't surprised. Wet lumber should never be used for structural work, especially outdoor structures. Any legitimate contractor would have known that. "Are they going to call the guy back to fix it?" "They tried. His phone's disconnected. I think he was fly-by-night." "That sucks." "The thing is," Marcus continued, "they're kind of in a bind. They spent their savings on this deck, and now they need to basically start over. Mom's been crying about it for weeks." I waited to see where this was going. "Maybe you could help them out. I know there was some drama about the pricing before, but they're family, and they're kind of desperate." "Marcus," I said, "are you asking me to fix a deck for free after they chose someone else because my prices were too high?" "Not for free, but maybe you could work with them on the pricing. They've learned their lesson about going cheap." I had to give him credit for audacity. "Have they called me?" I asked. "Well, no. I think they're embarrassed." "Then why are you calling me?" "Because you're my sister, and they're our parents. Family is supposed to help family." That phrase again. The same one Mom had used when she wanted me to hire Marcus. The same logic Dad had used when he wanted a discount. Family is supposed to help family, but only when they needed something from me. "Marcus," I said, "where was this attitude when I was starting my business and eating ramen noodles in a studio apartment?" "That was different." "How? You were making a choice we couldn't support." "And they made a choice I can't support. Hiring the cheapest bidder instead of trusting the daughter who's built a successful business doing exactly this kind of work." "Come on, Yara, you're really going to hold a grudge?" "I'm not holding a grudge. I'm running a business. If they want to hire me, they can call me directly, and we can discuss it just like any other customer." He hung up on me. The call I'd been expecting finally came 3 weeks later. It was Mom. "Honey," she said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "We need your help." "With what?" "The deck situation has gotten worse. We had a home inspector come out and he says we can't use it at all. It's structurally unsafe. We need to tear it down and start over." "Okay." "The problem is, we don't have the money. We spent our savings on the first contractor, and the insurance won't cover it because it was faulty workmanship." I waited. "We were hoping maybe you could help us. We know we made a mistake before. We should have trusted you from the beginning." "What kind of help are you looking for?" "Well, you do this kind of work. Maybe you could do it at cost. Just materials and labor for your guys. No profit markup." Even now, even when they were desperate, she was still trying to get a discount. "Mom," I said, "let me ask you something. When Marcus was in college and he needed help with tuition, did you charge him interest on the money you loaned him?" "Of course not. He's our son." "And when he was unemployed last year and he needed to move back home for a few months, did you charge him rent?" "That's different. He was going through a hard time." "I've been going through hard times too. The difference is you didn't help me through mine." "We've explained this. We couldn't support a decision we disagreed with. And I can't support a family that only values me when they need something." There was a long silence. "So you won't help us?" she said finally. "I didn't say that. I said I won't give you a discount. If you want to hire my company, I'll put together a bid just like I would for any customer. Professional work, fair pricing, quality guarantee. But we can't afford your regular rates." "Then maybe you need to find a way to afford them, or find another solution. How can you be so cold to your own family?" And that's when years of frustration finally came pouring out. "Cold?" I said. "Mom, I haven't heard from you in 6 months. The last time we talked, you asked me to hire Marcus for a job he wasn't qualified for, and when I explained why that wouldn't work, you accused me of being jealous. The time before that, you told me it wasn't too late to give up my business and go to college like I should have in the first place." She was quiet. "I've been running a successful business for 6 years. I own my own home. I employ 8 people who depend on me for their livelihoods. I've built something I'm proud of using skills you told me were worthless, and the only time any of you call me is when you want something. That's not true. When's the last time you asked me how business was going? When's the last time you congratulated me on a successful project? When's the last time any of you showed any interest in my life beyond what I could do for you? She couldn't answer. But you know what the really sad part is? I continued. I've been giving family rates all along, just not to you. What do you mean? 3 months ago, I rebuilt Mrs. Chen's front porch for the cost of materials. Last year, I built a wheelchair ramp for Bill down the street and wouldn't let him pay me at all. 2 weeks ago, I spent a Saturday helping the Rodriguez family fix their fence after that storm. Didn't charge them a penny. Why would you do work for free for strangers? They're not strangers. They're my neighbors. They're people who've supported me, who've referred customers to me, who've been there when I needed help. They're family. The silence stretched out. You know what? I said. I'll make you a deal. The same deal I give all my real family. What deal? I'll come over this weekend and assess the damage. I'll put together a plan to fix everything properly. Not just the deck, but all the other issues I noticed last time. The electrical, the roof, the driveway, everything. And I'll do it for free. I could hear her intake of breath. But I continued. You have to do something first. What? You have to admit that you were wrong about my career. You have to acknowledge that I built something successful with the skills you told me were worthless, and you have to apologize for 6 years of treating me like a failure. Another long silence. That's blackmail, she said finally. No, I said. That's accountability. You want me to treat you like family? Then you need to start treating me like family first. We've always treated you like family. You've treated me like a disappointment who occasionally becomes useful. The conversation ended there. She hung up on me. I didn't hear from any of them for 2 months, which was actually pretty typical. The only difference was that this time I knew they needed something from me and were choosing pride over practicality. Marcus finally cracked first. He called me on a Thursday evening in late summer. Look, he said without preamble, this situation with Mom and Dad is getting ridiculous. What situation? They're still dealing with the deck thing. They can't afford to hire another contractor, and they're too stubborn to apologize to you. Sounds like a them problem. It's becoming a family problem. They can't use their back door because the deck is unsafe to walk on. They're basically trapped in the house and winter's coming. I hadn't considered that aspect. The deck connected to their kitchen door, their main entrance to the backyard and garage. They could use the front door, I said. Come on, Yara, you know that's not practical for groceries and stuff. He was right, but it still wasn't my problem to solve. What do you want me to do, Marcus? Just fix their deck. I'll help pay for it. We can work out some kind of payment plan. With what money? You're still paying off student loans. I'll figure something out. Look, maybe they were wrong about some things, but they're still our parents. Our parents who chose to insult my intelligence and capabilities for years. Okay, yes, they were wrong about that. You've obviously done well for yourself. It was the first time he'd ever admitted that. But they're never going to say that, he continued. You know how they are. They don't apologize. They just move on and pretend things are different. That's not how this works, Marcus. You don't get to treat someone like garbage and then just move on when you need their help. So what do you want? You want them to grovel? I want them to acknowledge reality. I want them to admit they were wrong, not just about the deck, but about everything. About my career, about my choices, about my capabilities. And if they don't, then they can figure out their deck problem on their own. He hung up, frustrated, but I could tell he was starting to understand my position. The breakthrough came in October. Dad called me, which surprised me, because he'd basically refused to speak to me directly since the deck bid situation. Daughter, he said, we need to talk. About what? About this situation we're in. Your mother and I have been discussing it, and we think maybe we've been stubborn. I waited. The truth is, he continued, we've been getting advice from friends about the deck situation, and everyone says the same thing. They say we should have trusted you from the beginning. Okay. And looking back, maybe we didn't give your business the respect it deserved. It was a start, but it wasn't enough. Dad, I said, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying we made mistakes. We should have supported you more when you were starting out. And we should have trusted your expertise when we needed the deck work done. And there was a long pause. And we were wrong about your career choice, he said finally. You've obviously built something successful. How successful? Another pause. More successful than we gave you credit for. I could tell this was killing him, but he needed to say it. Dad, I said, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Okay. Do you respect what I do for a living? Silence. Do you believe that my skills have value? More silence. Yes, he said finally. I believe your skills have value. Do you regret telling me that welding wasn't a real profession? The longest pause yet. Yes, I regret saying that. It wasn't a complete apology, but it was more than I'd ever gotten from him before. All right, I said. I'll come over this weekend and take another look at the situation. When I showed up on Saturday morning, the dynamic was completely different. Instead of treating me like the disappointing daughter who'd finally agreed to help them out, they treated me like a professional contractor they'd hired to solve a problem. Mom had coffee ready and a list of questions about timeline and logistics. Dad had cleared a space in the garage for me to store materials. They both listened carefully as I explained what needed to be done and why. The deck situation was worse than I'd expected. The shoddy contractor hadn't just used wet lumber. He'd also skipped several critical structural elements. The footings were too shallow. The joist spacing was wrong, and the connection to the house wasn't properly flashed, which had allowed water damage to the siding. This is going to be expensive, I told them honestly. We're basically starting from scratch, plus we have to fix the water damage to the house. How expensive? Mom asked. I did the math. With materials, labor for my crew, and the additional structural work that was now necessary, we were looking at about $18,000. But, I continued, I'm going to do this one differently than my usual jobs. They both looked nervous. I'm going to do it myself on weekends instead of using my crew during business hours. That saves you the labor markup, and I've got relationships with suppliers that can get us better pricing on materials. All in, we're probably looking at $12,000. That's very generous, Dad said. It's fair, I corrected. I'm not making money on this job, but I'm not losing money either. Over the next 6 weeks, I spent my Saturdays rebuilding their deck properly. It was actually relaxing, working with my hands on a smaller project without the pressure of deadlines and customer management. But more importantly, it gave us time to talk, really talk, for the first time in years. I owe you an apology, Dad said one Saturday while we were setting the new footings. For what? For not believing in you, for thinking that college was the only path to success. I kept working, waiting for him to continue. I grew up different than you, he said. My dad worked construction, and he broke his body doing it. He always told me to get an education so I wouldn't have to work as hard as he did. When you said you wanted to learn a trade, I heard my father saying that college boys were soft, that real men worked with their hands, and you thought I was insulting your choices. Maybe. I don't know. All I know is I was wrong. You didn't choose welding because you couldn't handle college. You chose it because you knew what you were good at, and you had a plan. And I've done well with it. You've done better than well. You own a business. You employ people. You have skills that are always in demand. That's more than a lot of people with college degrees can say. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start. The project finished up right before Thanksgiving. The new deck was beautiful, better than anything they could have afforded from a regular contractor because I'd used premium materials at cost and taken the time to do custom details that most contractors would charge extra for. But the real victory came the following week when Dad called me with a different kind of request. Daughter, he said, we've got a neighbor who's been asking about your company. Their son is getting married next spring and they want to have the reception in their backyard. They need some custom work done, a pergola, some built-in seating, that kind of thing. Okay, I said. I gave them your business card. I told them you do excellent work and you're completely trustworthy. It was a small thing, but it represented a huge shift. For the first time in my adult life, my father was actively promoting my business instead of undermining it. I appreciate that, I said. There's one more thing, he added. Your mother wants to know if you'd be willing to come to Thanksgiving dinner this year as a family. I thought about it. The old hurts were still there, but the dynamic had changed. They'd acknowledged my success. They'd apologized in their way, and they'd treated me with respect during the deck project. Will Marcus be there? I asked. Yes. And will he be making jokes about blue-collar work or asking for career advice? Dad chuckled. I think Marcus has learned some things too. His engineering career hasn't exactly gone according to plan, and watching you run your own business has been educational for him. I showed up to Thanksgiving dinner for the first time in 3 years. The house felt different, maybe because I had just spent 6 weeks working on it, or maybe because the family dynamics had shifted. Marcus was there with his girlfriend Sarah, who I'd never met before. He'd finally found a stable engineering job that he liked, though it paid less than what I'd made as a second-year business owner. So, he said, as we stood around in the kitchen while Mom finished cooking, I owe you an apology too. For what? for being condescending about your career choice, for thinking that my college degree made me smarter than you. And now I realize that you were the smart one all along. You figured out what you were good at, you got trained in it efficiently, and you built a business around it. Meanwhile, I spent 4 years and $80,000 learning things I don't use in my actual job. College isn't worthless, I said. It's just not the only path to success. No, but trade school was definitely the right path for you, and probably would have been for me too, if I'm being honest. During dinner, something happened that had never happened before. My parents asked me about my work, not in the dismissive way they used to, but with genuine interest. How many employees do you have now? Mom asked. 8 full-time, plus I bring in specialists for certain projects. And they all know welding? Some do, but we do more than just welding now. We're a full-service fabrication and repair company, custom architectural metalwork, industrial equipment repair, specialized construction projects. That sounds complicated, Dad said. It is. That's why there's good money in it. Most contractors won't take on projects that require custom solutions. Speaking of money, Marcus said, if you don't mind me asking, how well has the business done? It was a question they'd never asked before, and I wasn't sure how to answer it without sounding like I was bragging. Well enough that I'm not worried about student loan payments, I said, glancing at Marcus. Damn, he said, laughing. That's better than most people with college degrees. After dinner, Dad pulled me aside. Yara, I have something for you, he said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a check for $12,000, exactly what I'd charged them for the deck work. Dad, I said, we already settled this. No, we settled the cost of materials and your time. This is different. What do you mean? This is 6 years of Christmas and birthday presents that we should have given you, but didn't because we were too proud to admit we were wrong about your choices. I looked at the check, then at him. I don't need your money, Dad. I know you don't. That's not why I'm giving it to you. I'm giving it to you because you're my daughter, and I should have been supporting you all along instead of waiting until I needed something from you. And if I hadn't been successful, would you still be apologizing? He thought about that. Probably not, he said honestly, and that makes me even more wrong than I thought. It's been 3 years since that Thanksgiving, and my relationship with my family has completely transformed. Not perfect. There's still some residual awkwardness from those years of conflict, but functional and respectful. My business is doing better than ever. We're up to 12 employees now, and we're booked solid through next summer. I've been able to buy out 2 smaller competitors, and we're looking at expanding into commercial HVAC work. Marcus ended up leaving engineering entirely. He's working as a project manager for a residential construction company, and he's much happier than he ever was trying to make his degree work for him. He still has student loan debt, but he's making progress on it. My parents have become my biggest advocates. They brag about my business to their friends, refer customers to me, and actually seem proud of what I've accomplished. Dad has started telling people that I'm the successful entrepreneur in the family. And maybe, just maybe, that's what I'd wanted to hear all along.